If you're tired of buying what sounds like the same drum kit over and over again, today I'm going to show you the steps that you can take to create your own trap drum kit. For example, I was able to take these dull, boring drums here, and using the techniques I'm going to show you guys today, I was able to completely transform those drums into the ones that you're about to hear in this beat right here. So even though I am showing you guys how to create your own drum kits today, if you like the ones that were just played in this beat, they are available to download for free in the description box below. I did a video a while back on how to create your own boom bap drums, and in that video I talked about this concept of content and character. What that means is when you create your own drum sounds, you want to focus on making sure the sounds that you are creating are both useful and unique. First off, let's start off with examining the kick that I have here. As you can hear, it's not very useful, it's not cutting through the mix, it's not doing what I need a kick to do. So we're going to first focus on how to create a more useful kick, something that has a little bit more content. We'll start by opening up an EQ on the kick and looking at the different frequency ranges that this kick inhabits. So if I'm planning on using this kick and transforming it into a trap type kick, there are a few changes that I'm going to want to make. I know that a lot of the kick punchiness comes around the 80 to 100 hertz range, so what I'm going to do is give a generous boost in that area. My 808 is going to take care of the sub frequencies below this, so I don't really need to worry about those frequencies for now. I'm just going to do a roll off on the low end here. Second, what I'm going to do is cut off a lot of the high end here. I know for a trap type of kick, most of the time they are very thumpy and mostly present in the low end of the spectrum. They don't really have much of a high end presence. So it sounds like we are getting closer here. In order to make this kick a little bit more useful, now what I'm going to do is open up a bass boost plugin, which is a sort of specialized EQ, and again just focus in on the frequency ranges that I want to boost and make sure that this kick is becoming a lot more useful and a lot more of that thumpy type of trap kick. Next up, I'm going to add some saturation and some distortion on top of the kick. This is going to help bring a lot more strength to the kick by adding additional harmonics. So I used a plugin called Saturn here, which is one of my favorite saturation plugins, and I used Wave Shaper here. And this is a great FL stock plugin that can help easily add some distortion. What I did here was I added a point down here and I added a point down here. And as you move this point higher and higher, it's going to add more and more distortion. So I'm just going to keep this relatively subtle and just add a tiny bit of distortion. At this point you can add a little bit of compression if you'd like, but for me I really like the way this kick is sounding right now, so I'm going to move on to layering. In this example of layering, what I'm going to do is focus on the content of this kick. Just try to layer sounds on top in order to make this kick a lot more useful and sort of pronounce the parts that I like about this kick already. Eventually I found this kick here. It doesn't sound too impressive by itself, but once I add this on top of my other kick, it's just going to help bring out some of the qualities that I already really liked about that initial kick, and overall just going to help this kick become a lot more useful and a lot more content filled and just shine through the mix a lot more. It's very subtle, but it does make a difference. So here's without that kick. It just adds a little bit more punchiness to the first kick. Now that I have the usefulness part of this kick really down and I really like what I'm hearing, I'm going to focus in on the character part, the unique part of the kick, and just try to make this kick a little bit more interesting by doing more layering on top. I found this kick here. Again, not very interesting by itself, but once I layer everything together, this kick just sounds a lot more complete now and just a lot more useful and a lot more unique. So overall though, I didn't get too crazy with the character of the kick. I did just take another kick and layer it on top. We can get a lot crazier with our layering and just bring a lot more character and uniqueness to our sounds, which I'm going to do next with the snare. As you guys can hear, the snare isn't all that impressive, so let's start off by making this snare a lot more content based, a lot more useful in our mix. So let's roll off the frequencies that we don't need and start boosting the frequencies that we do need. So I'm going to get rid of a lot of the low end here and a little bit of the high end. And I'm going to give boost to the low end of the snare down here around the 230 hertz range. This is typically where you get a lot of that punchiness in your snare. And I'm also going to do a boost at the top here around the 7K range, because this is where you get a lot of that snappiness out of your trap snares. Next up is a secret plugin that I love to use on all of my snares to get it a lot more snappy and a lot more punchy, which is this plugin called Camel Crusher. This is a saturation plugin and it's absolutely free. I have linked it in the description box below. What I like to do is just turn all the dials down except for the master, which I'll turn all the way up. The mix I'll turn all the way down. And at this point, I'll just add a little bit of distortion onto the snare. Both tube and mechanical distortion. And I'll add a little bit of compression as well. And then I'll just turn it up in the mix, just so I can gauge how much I want. As you can hear already, it's just making such a huge difference. Again, if I turn this plugin off, it's just not very pronounced in the mix, but when I turn the plugin on, it just becomes such a much better snare. Another useful tool for your snares is a transient processor. What this is going to do is help control the overall shape of your snare. So for a typical trap type of snare, I want a high attack just to create more of a punchy attack, a more punchy feeling to the snare. And I'm going to decrease the release so it feels a little bit more mechanical, like it's actually coming from an 808 machine. It's a little bit more synthetic feeling, and I'm just controlling the resonant tones of the snare. Alright, so this snare is sounding a lot more useful to me now. It's sounding like the content portion of the snare is taken care of. It's cutting through the mix perfectly. So now what I'm going to do is add a little bit more character, a little bit more uniqueness to the snare. Again, just like I did with the kick, I'm going to do this by layering. In this example, I added a clap underneath. Again, the clap doesn't sound too impressive by itself, but adding it underneath a snare is just going to help bring a little bit more punchiness, a little bit more attack to that snare. This time around though, unlike the kick, I'm going to start adding noises that are atypical, a little bit more different, a little bit more weird, a little bit more unique in order to improve the character of the sound. I found this noise here. I did a bunch of processing to it just to control the overall frequency and also a little bit more reverb onto it. So now when we add it all together, this snare just sounds a lot more unique compared to if I just did not have the sound. This is how you can help add a lot more character to your sound. So with the kick, what we did was just add a bunch of different kicks together, and we ended up with a very typical, not as unique sound. In this example here though, I have a snare, a clap, but I also added a crazy weird noise that I was able to find here. Again, I could have just stacked another snare underneath and just have this be a little bit more regular, a little bit more bland, but what I decided to do is go a little bit more crazy and just stack this weird sound underneath, and I was able to create a lot more of a unique sound. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, just how much content do you want to bring to the sound, how much character do you want to bring to the sound. That's up to you, but this is how it's done, just adding irregular sounds as opposed to just your typical snares, claps, whatever. So layering isn't the only way that you can achieve a crazy, irregular, character-based sound. What you can also do is take your normal mixing tools that you'd use every day and just push them to extreme and do very interesting things with them. I'm going to show you what I mean here with the hi-hat. So this is how the hi-hat sounds without any of the effects that I put on top of them. And so what I did was I first started off with focusing in on the content, again, just by taking an EQ and boosting the frequency that I like. And then after that, what I did was I compressed it just to bring a little bit more presence into the mix. And then I started getting really audacious and a little bit crazy with the effects. I added a pitching tool on top just to completely change the way it sounds. And then I added distortion on top and a little bit more distortion. And then I went in with another EQ and I just did some very extreme EQing here. Just boosted certain frequencies and reduced others just to create a lot more of a unique, crazy sound with a hi-hat. Again, this is how it sounds without any of the effects on. And once I stack all these effects on top, it just ends up being a lot more useful and a lot more interesting. Lastly, what I'm going to do is show you a very extreme example of what you can achieve with just your mixing tools to create a very unique sound. What I have here is just a very typical sounding cowbell, nothing too interesting, nothing too unique about it. But once I add all of these effects on top, again here I have multiple saturation plugins, multiple EQs. I just got really crazy with delay and reverb sounds. Pitching techniques just went really crazy, just tried to throw a whole bunch of different experimental techniques on top, and it ended up with just a lot more of a unique sound. Again, here's how it sounds without any effects. And to make this a lot more of a unique sound using just mixing tools, it just sounds a lot more interesting. Again, there's no right or wrong way about going about this, but what you want to do is follow this general guideline of first focusing in on the content of a sound. If you have a kick, make sure it's doing what a kick is supposed to do. Make sure that it's thumpy in all the right parts. If you have a snare, make sure it's doing what a snare is supposed to do. Just make sure that your sounds are as useful as they can be. After that, what you want to do is focus in on the character of the sound. Just focus in on layering typical or atypical sounds, or you can just push your mixing tools to the extreme just to achieve a new and interesting, unique texture that didn't exist before. Lastly, I could do a section on 808s, but I'm going to save that for another video down the road. Once again, guys, if you want to download the drums from this beat, they are available in the description box below. Also, please do like it and subscribe if you found this video useful. Leave a comment down below. Let me know if any of these things were confusing. Maybe I can help clear anything up that you guys are wondering. And I guess I'll see you guys next Tuesday.